to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
Mr. Vince Todd with Accessa Group. How you doing, sir?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Welcome to the show, man. Appreciate you coming on, and interested to get your story and what you guys have going on, because there's quite a few companies behind Accessa.
There are, yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'm happy to join you here in snowy Indy, as you can see behind me. There are technically four different what we call business units, if you will, of Accessa that make up Accessa Corp per se. One is the coating side, which I'm sure we'll probably spend a fair amount of time talking about. Another side is the chemicals side. So that's really more, we can get into this a little bit, but metal pre-treatments, surface treatments, things of that nature. Then of course, naturally we got into equipment to some extent. That's a debatable topic. But we do a little bit there just because it's nature of the beast. You get involved in the coatings or the chemical side, you're going to deal with the equipment side as well. And then the newest baby, if you will, is the marketplace side, which if you want to call it our e-commerce initiative.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we had DC on a couple weeks ago. Really awesome to hear his story. So before we get into all that part, just kind of how'd you get into it? I mean, I know your dad was involved. How did that evolve? Where did Accessa come from? Let's hear the backstory.
Sure. So the company itself was started in 1979 by two gentlemen up in Elkhart, Indiana, and they were salesmen. Wanted to kind of do their own thing, so they got into the distribution game. And the name of the company at that time was called Paints and Solvents. Super original, I know.
Straightforward.
Yeah, I think I know what they do. And kind of fast forward a little bit, got to a point where one of them had retired, and the other one was looking to do so. And my dad helped broker a deal for them to be acquired by a larger distribution company. And then at some point around, I want to say 2000-ish, maybe late 90s, my father was working for that company, and a similar pattern was happening there where different divisions of that company were being sold off or what have you. And I think my dad knew the owner of that company, just approached him and said, "Hey, would you mind, are you open to me buying the coatings division out?" Which was at the time Paints and Solvents. So they ended up working out a deal there. And then in 2001, 2000, I can't remember 2 weeks ago anymore, but early 2000s, he brought in a new product line on. So they were doing wood coatings as well as electrostatic coatings. And when I say electrostatic, most people think of powder coatings, which are applied electrostatically, but these are liquid coatings applied electrostatically.
Yeah, we dabbled in that a little bit. That's a whole nother universe.
Somewhat similar concepts. Well, we can talk about this too. It's amazing. You get somebody who's done one type of coating sales for 20 years, and you say, "Hey, you can also sell this stuff." They won't gravitate towards it because they don't feel comfortable with it. But honestly, 80% of the questions are the same. A little bit of training, and you'll be just fine. But I digress.
A couple lunches with engineers that like to talk, and you'll be an expert now.
Potentially.
At least in the sales side.
Right, yeah. So anyway, in the early 2000s, they brought in a new product line, and I was working for another company at the time in distribution, but not in this marketplace, not in this sector at all, completely different industry. And anyway, he approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to join me here? And I'd like you to manage this new product line, get to know this market, whatever." I think at that point, I was kind of in the tech industry, which was, sexy and cool and all that at the time. The bubble hadn't quite burst yet. But I was working a ton of hours. Loved where I was at. Loved the guy that owned the company. We were blowing up, but I was putting a ton of hours in, and yes, I was getting paid for it, of course. But the rewards were going to the ownership, and I get it. And we'd always kind of been raised. Our mother had a franchise of frozen yogurt stores here in Central Indiana, so it was kind of this entrepreneurial spirit that the family had, and that's kind of where I was always wanting to gravitate towards. I just didn't know what yet. I don't think anybody necessarily comes out of college and says, "Yeah, I want to go into the industrial coatings business." It just sort of happens.
If they do, they're weird.
Yeah, true. So anyway, I said, yeah, let's do it. And I think one thing you will find about us, and we share this with our vendors, we share this with really anyone who asks. When I say we, I'm talking about my brother and I. We are not silver spoon kids. Like, yes, we are fortunate we got a head start, but we are not we're going to come in here and put it on cruise control and just ride daddy's coattails. No, like I'm 100% never satisfied. Like if we were at X when I came in the early 2000s, I know for a fact we have about quadrupled the size of the business today.
Wow.
And there's still so much more opportunity. And that's what we want to keep doing. We want to put our own stamp on it, really grow this thing, and then see what happens.
I can't remember who I was talking to. It might have been offline, but I say it all the time when people are talking about what they're going to do after college, and family members who are getting around that age. And I fell in this industry by accident. I think most people end up doing that, but it's not sexy, but I mean, firsthand, we have a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, nothing's real serious in this industry, and you can make awesome money. That's what I tell them. I said, if you want to kind of goof off and work and still make good money, then go into coatings. I mean, it's not something you go tell all your friends and you're going to use to pick up girls, but
that's for sure. Yes.
The free time that you have with coatings and the money that you can make, that's what's going to help you.
Yeah. My wife goes, "Oh, he sells paint." I go, now they think I sell like house paint. Like I'm going, door to door with a gallon of paint. Like, hey, no, it's not. That's not it. That's a good point though. One thing, especially when I first came in, I was more of a sales rep and spent a lot more time in the field than I do now. But I'm not an engineer by education or anything. The one thing that I thought was really cool though is, especially as we further diversified, it wasn't just wood coatings. We do metal coatings and plastic coatings and whatnot, but if in a day I could go see, let's say 5 different customers and they're in the different market segments, just seeing how stuff's made. I'm sure you've done the same, but I've been in a few plants where like, number one, couldn't believe how many parts were coming down the line. Like they're not the only manufacturer in the world making that widget.
Yes.
And yet they're just, hundreds or thousands coming down the line. And then you look at their process, like, okay, who came up with this idea? Like, who thought? And how many times did they screw up to finally get to this process? I don't know. Those are the things I kind of geek out a little bit on, and just look at it and say, okay, like, I don't know where this concept came from. It's working, or honestly, sometimes it's not. So hey, we're here as your partner. Yeah, I want to sell you coatings ultimately, but like, I'm also a blank slate. Tell me what I don't know, and if you're having an issue, run it by me. Maybe I'll think of something that someone hasn't, and if it works out for you, great.
I think those are excellent points. And then I used to go to OEMs, and you're trying to help them solve a problem, because that's, essentially all we're doing is solving problems. But the businesses, I'm like, how did you even come up with the idea to put this liquid coating on these bolts and then tumble them around, and it gives you a certain amount of pressure when they torque it in, and then it tightens up and it won't go anymore? Like, who in the Sam hell thought of this? Just the ingenuity that people come up with, that they are turned it into $1 million business. You're just sitting there going, damn it. Like,
it was that one guy you're talking about in Waco who had too many hits, and then he had his mind started spinning and somehow came up with that versus just being a method.
Exactly. Hey, let's put some use to this. It's crazy how all the places that we would go into, and long-term customers that we'd had, and I've just been like, this is a legitimate business. This is freaking genius. Turned it into a multi-million-dollar industry, and you're just like, and how many things in the world have a version of an industrial coating / paint on them?
Yeah. So two things that you just hit on. Number one, I'll have to go start with in reverse order. The latter piece of that was how many things have some sort of protective coating on them. And I don't think like the average Joe who's not in the industry, I get they don't think about that. But those of us who are in the industry, whether it's wood or not, like the first thing we're looking at is like, oh man, that has a coating on it. It's unreal how many things have a protective coating on it of some kind, which is great for us, right? Um, the other piece was how many different ways there are to make money. I have two college age kids now, and they're all trying to figure out like what do you want to do? And I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't, and it's okay if you don't want to fall into one of the typical buckets. There are a million ways to make money these days, even more so than we were your age because the internet wasn't really around or it was just starting to come online. Like there's so many different ways to make money. And to your point, when you go out there and you see, yeah, you might go to a manufacturer that's making the car, but then you go in another manufacturer that's only making one little widget that goes in that car, but the guy's making 10 million of them. That's all he does and does it really well, and he's killing it, and that's okay.
I used to do lighting and sound in high school, DJ'd and did concerts and stuff, and the guy who owned that business, his name was Steve, and he was kind of a mentor, and he took from doing everything and just went to do lighting. And I kind of took what he said to heart, and it rings true, but he said, be the best at what you're doing. Don't, yeah, we all want more business, but if you turn into the god at lighting, you'll have way more business. I mean, his family, his mother-in-law owned a company in Oklahoma. I mean, these things were this big. They made these springs. That's it. Different versions of a spring that were like this big, and they had like a $10 million company, and they sold them to Boeing and all kinds of manufacturers. It's just a piece of wire that was twisted.
Why didn't I think of that? Damn it.
I know. You're just like, God dang it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said about not just being the best or being really good at what you do, having a laser-like focus, but yet at the same time also being, and then this means, or can be interpreted different ways, but still being a little bit diversified. And that's something we've kind of focused on. Like, we know we can't be everything to everyone. And sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap because, just in the coatings industry, like there's a whole number of different ways we can continue to expand. Doesn't mean it's right. And I kind of have to rein myself back in sometimes when I get excited and want to go into something new. We get approached about stuff all the time. It's like, yeah, that's just not what we do. Or, what, we're not really good at that. And if it's one of the other, meaning if either we shouldn't go into it, or if we're going to go into it, we need to go in 100% and go balls to the wall, because otherwise it's going to be done half-assed, as my dad would always say, and it's not worth our time, and it'll backfire. So I think for anybody, diversification, that's just like your financial planner would tell you, diversification is key. You got to be able to do a couple different things, but whatever those are, whether it's one thing, well, preferably not just one, but a couple of things or a dozen things, just do them really well, and be really clear on what it is that you do and what your intent is.
Well, and then I think where, and this kind of gets off on that business tangent, but there's books, famous one, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where he has a ton of businesses, but I think where that comes into play is understanding what your business is. Your business is, as someone like that, you can have multiple businesses, but you have people that run those businesses, and your job is reading statements and making sure the right people are in place. It's not running the business. If that's what you're good at, then that's what you do. Don't think that you have to run every single one of them. That's a key thing when you start trying to step, what I would say, outside the box or diversification. Get the right people in the right places. I was always taught you really never want to be the smartest person in the room. That's right. A bad place to be in.
And you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be okay with that. I mean, when I used to work in right after college, I worked at a company worked at Avis Rent-A-Car, and I managed the Avis in Denver, and they had this guy. His name was Dave Olson. Everyone calls him Disney Dave because he preached customer service and based on a book called Inside the Magic Kingdom. And it's talking about how Disney sets himself apart and how that's true in any industry and how you have to pay attention to the details and things like that. But he would also, his best advice I ever got with him was the best way to get a promotion in the corporate world is to have all of your stuff done and look bored. Yeah, that's when your supervisor's like, well, that guy needs more work. He doesn't have enough to do. Well, I guess we need to promote him so he can manage more people because clearly he can get his people to do the work that he needs done. So, and when I was in the corporate world, that was eye opening. It was a short stint in the corporate world, but you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. The Disney thing, 100% for sure, get that, and having a sense of self awareness, understanding that you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, so you want to surround yourself with others. But like, we're not all really good at everything. Like, I know what my strengths are. I also know what my weaknesses are, and I'm okay with that. And you need to be able to recognize what your weaknesses are, such that let's say in the business world or in this company, like, I need them to find the best person at that I'm not good at and bring them in. And if they're light years ahead of me and smarter than I am, sweet, awesome, come on in, man.
Yeah, as a business owner, hire people to do the things that you don't want to do. Don't think that you have to do it all or the stuff that you're not good at. Just have the self-awareness to bring someone in to do that and then do what you love. That makes business ownership a really sweet deal. I mean,
yeah, got to put the ego aside. And there's some people out there who, whether it's this industry or anything really, I mean, they think they're the greatest and have all the answers and good at everything. And it's like, none of us are, whether we think we are or not.
No. So kind of get it back into there. As a distributor, how many locations are you guys on the coating side running with Accessa now?
Yeah, right now we have 8 physical locations based out of Indianapolis. We have 3 in the state of Indiana, 1 in Ohio, 2 in Illinois, and then out in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, you guys are out in Denver?
Correct, yeah.
Man, I didn't know you guys were all the way out there.
Yeah.
That's quite a reach from Indianapolis.
It is, yeah. So that's a good story. So basically, there was a single location distributor in Denver, and the gentleman was getting up in age and was ready to retire, and we distributed some of the same lines, and so he was speaking with his vendor rep, and that vendor rep happened to be our vendor rep as well, and knew that we're always open to looking at new opportunities. And so they approached us, and he had actually approached us the year before about a different location in a different city, and we were like, it just didn't fit what we were looking to do at the time. But then the Denver opportunity came, and we're like, I go to Colorado on once or twice a year, perhaps to ski. That wouldn't be a bad idea. But then obviously digging into the business itself, outside the personal piece, it just started to make more sense. But to your point, there's a lot of geography between Indy and Denver, or our closest location to them is, I guess, technically either Chicago or Arthur, Illinois. Still a long ways away. There's a big gap there, and we recognize that. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Is that a recent acquisition or something you guys have had for a while?
No, that's been 7 or 8 years now.
Okay, well, that seems
the most recent one was Pittsburgh. I forgot to say Pittsburgh. DC coming on that one. So yeah, Pittsburgh was the most recent one. That's been just over 2 years now.
Yeah, that was, I mean, from talking to DC in an earlier episode, that seems like, that kind of helped him settle down a little bit and definitely propelled him to that next level, or, that division into the marketplace to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes along with that conversation we just had about, finding people who are really good at certain things and letting them run with it. And that's, DC had started that, I call it e-com piece a little bit, maybe, but not in the truest sense of the word, not the form that he really envisioned it. He's like, all right, man, something's got to give. Like, I'm one person. And it honestly, the way kind of that all went down, quite frankly, I don't know if he shared this or not, but I think it was New Year's Day, 3 years ago, something like that, or 4 years, or whatever it was now. And literally, I was shooting some emails out on New Year's Day because clearly I was bored. And I shot one to him and just said, hey, Happy New Year. Hope everything's going well. Because we had met before multiple times because we represented some of the same brands that were at distributor meetings or Atlanta or whatever. And I don't remember exactly how I asked him, but say, hey, if there's anything in the future that you want to partner on that think that might make sense, obviously we're always happy to chat about that. And wasn't very long he came back and said, okay, define partnership. And I said, well, obviously we know partnership can mean a lot of different things, and then the rest is history, I guess.
Man, that's crazy. I mean, he seems from my time in the manufacturing side of coatings and dealing with DC, pre-Accessa and post-Accessa, he seems a lot more in his groove, not so stressed. I mean, I could tell that the stress level he has, and going after some clients on the manufacturing side to reach out, hey, can we do this, and before, he just didn't have time. I mean, he's just so busy.
Coming into it, providing him that background, or I should say, that corporate support to take some of the administrative type things off. I mean, let's face it. There's a lot of people out there who think, oh, you own your own business. That means you got all this time to burn. You're making all this money. Life is great. I'm like, okay, so clearly you've never started a business before, or you're in something else that I'm not aware of. So please share, because I was going to be bald regardless, but I can assure you, having been running a business now since the early 2000s, like I ripped it out.
Yep.
Multiple times if I had.
There's no other way.
Yeah, it's good to hear that you recognize that in DC. It's good that you kind of notice that. And I think hopefully he feels that way. I mean, he's got a huge project on his plate that we've now gotten off the ground and rolling with, and we have some really big plans for it. But I hope he feels happy that not only can he see some of his vision come to life, but he feels, I guess, relieved or empowered that he has a team behind him to support him and doing either things that he either A, doesn't like, B, not really good at, or C, just we only have so much time of the day and only so much energy to put forth, and if it's being just constantly extracted at 100%, like, you're either going to get burnt out or you can only scale so far. I mean, scaling a business, most businesses don't, like, I can't remember there's some facts and figures to this, but a lot of businesses never get past $1 million, and then if they do, great, then you're in the top 40% or that do, which sounds crazy, but then to go from 1 million to 10 million, it's like it shrinks down to like 10 or 5% or something like crazy like that. And you can't do that as a solo individual. Like, I'm not saying you can't. Maybe there are people who prove me wrong, I'm sure, but
I mean, depending on what the business is, but like in our industry, I tell guys all the time, I coach painters and guys that are wanting to go to the next level. And I'm just, it's a lot of what you're saying. Like, I was doing $1 million, over 1 million, but I had 6 to 8 guys working for me. I was doing administrative. I wasn't painting. Like, in this world, if you want to take your business to the next level, you have to quit working in your business and start working on your business.
100%.
There's no other way. If you spend all your time in the business, you're never going to grow probably 100 in this world, 100, maybe $150 if you have a killer year with one helper and you're painting all the time. It's just not possible. There's not enough hours in the day.
You nailed it on the head, because when my brother and I started taking over the day-to-day in 2005-ish, our father was kind of splitting that, kind of on the teeter-totter. One day he was in it, the next day he was on it, then he was back in it. And it's hard to get out of that for a couple of reasons. One, if you're so hands-on, you're used to it. And ultimately what we figured out is he's really good being in it. And I don't know if you ever met my dad. He's still alive. He's 85 now. He's obviously not working anymore, but he was so into it, such a old school but really good salesperson, super type A personality. In the administrative stuff, he honestly didn't want to do. He didn't want to dick around with HR. He didn't want to do a lot of that stuff. But he's like, that's part of being a business owner, right? Like I've got to have people to do that. So we figured all that out and talked about, who's good at what and who's not good at what, and figured that out. And you hit the nail on it. There are days where you've got to focus on the business versus in it, because that's the only way you're going to be able to scale. And fortunately, I mean, we've certainly had our moments where, my brother and I were like, man, we're spending too much time in it and we're not able to work on it. And fortunately, we've gotten over that hump and now can do the opposite and work more on it than in it.
Yeah, and it's a hard, like, for people to think that it's an easy hump. Like, I've coached guys, and since I got out of the corporate world and started the podcast and doing some consulting and coaching and helping guys to try to, like, it is something that as a coach, I've learned I've had to be very aggressive, but there's just some guys that just cannot overcome that.
Not only are you trying to find people to bring onto your team that can do things better than you, it's you have to allow them to do that. You have to trust in your hiring that you've hired the right person. Okay, let Jim or Jane do their thing. And that's also very difficult. I mean, because if it's your business, there's an emotional attachment to it. And I know it's easy for me to say this. I've talked to other folks as well. It's hard to let go of things, but you have to, and you have to trust the process. And if it does fail, then okay, well then John or Jane may not be the right person. Let's go find the one that is, and then bring them in.
Yeah, I tell my guys all the time, I get it. You have your way of doing it. That's not going to be Jim or Jane's way. You have to set the expectation of what the end result is. Here's the goal. And then you got to get the F out the way. Let them go achieve the goal. They may not do it like you do it, but if they get it done to the goal that you want, that's what we're trying to achieve.
Correct. Yeah. And you hit the nail on it again. Set a high standard. I mean, if you have high standards, set that high standard. And as long as they're maintaining that standard and their end result is the right end result, how they get there, to your point, maybe different than how you would have done it, but as long as they get there and they do it the right way.
Exactly. I remember, so when I had my painting company in Oklahoma, my father-in-law, I bought him out, and he'd had it for 30 years. And then when we moved down to Texas, he's still a great mentor of mine. One of these days, I'm going to talk him into getting on an episode, because he's 72, wants to spend his time in Colorado skiing and hiking and all that stuff. But when I went to sell the business, because we moved to Texas for my wife's job, so I sold the company, and I went to him and I was like, all right, DK, we called him DK. I was like, told him what was going on. And I was like, got two options. If you want to buy the business back, and he'd been out of it for about 10 years. And he looked at me, he goes, sell that son of a bitch. I don't want it.
Yeah.
He's like, I've been out for 10 years. I'm done. Kind of probably like it would be for your dad right now. Hey, Dad, you want to come back? Oh, no.
I know my dad's 85, so he's beyond wanting to come back in. But still at 85, I know exactly what his response would be, and I probably don't want to repeat that on here. Two words.
I can. Yeah, it's not. What do we say? Not the most PC response,
but appropriate nonetheless.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably very appropriate. So I've been doing a lot of talks, and you guys do quite a bit in Indiana. I would imagine you guys have a large majority of the Amish cabinet workers and even like the RV industry and stuff like that.
Yeah, our customer base is very diverse.
Yeah. How was like the RV industry? Everyone knows I live in an RV. I live in a motorhome, but how's that progression to the water base? Because I know those are some old school guys, even the Amish. Are they accepting the water-based coatings better, or are they still pretty much staying in their world of solvent?
Yeah. So we actually had this conversation yesterday in a meeting. We're in enough markets that in our customer base is pretty diverse. So like, one day you're in an RV plant. Then you're hitting several Amish customers. Then you're in downtown Chicago hitting, some interior designer place that's doing high end fancy stuff, whatever. Like on one hand, it's good. I mean, I like the diversity, but it's different. It really runs the gamut. The Chicago's, the Denver's, some of those markets, water base is already happening. Yes, there's still some CVs and pre-cats being sprayed, don't get me wrong, but they are moving to water, and it's in a number of different reasons. Denver's pretty outdoorsy, pretty environmentally focused, so they're going to move on that route. But at the same time, they're getting pressured. I mean, if you're closer to an urban setting and you're a shop that's emitting, VOCs or whatever, like they're being watched, and so they're being pushed from that aspect. You get out in the country, out in the sticks, and let's face it, they don't know that you exist. They don't know where you are. You've been spraying conversion varnish for 25 years. Even though you may have become more educated on the formaldehyde issue and whatnot, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's what I know. No one's telling me I have to change, so why do it? That said, and Chicago's moving to waterborne big time, and that's been interesting because it's not just authorities coming to Zach's finished shop saying, hey, you're over your threshold. You need to find something that's lower VOC, no HAPs, whatever, whether it's still solvent or start to move water. But our insurance rates are going up because we're storing flammable materials in a warehouse. And then they're saying, well, wait a minute, how many gallons do you have in here? And then we're like, oh God, here we go. And sure enough, they're like, okay, well, here's your limit, unless you're going to build this, bomb shelter, basically. And oh, by the way, even if you build this bomb shelter in a building that you don't own, it's going to cost you a whole bunch of money to build, you can still only keep so many gallons in there. And I'm like, what? Like, that's not even going to get me through a week. So it's coming in both directions. So like, at least in that market. So Chicago's really moving to water. I have a lot of customers in the transition process of moving from solvent to water. Very big PU market. A few CVs and precats, but for the most part, it's either solvent-based PU or they're moving to water for the majority. Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, in terms of outside of the urban setting, you go out in the country, some of these Amish communities, CVs, precats still being used. They are asking you about water. You'll go to a trade, there's some smaller regional shows, and they'll come up and we'll have conversations about water because water's now been more in the forefront over the last 5 years, maybe a decade. And let's face it, the water that was around when I first got in this industry in the early 2000s was not that great, right? It didn't dry very fast. And ultimately, the once it was cured, like the finish just wasn't.
It was horrible. Yeah.
Today, some of the water are pretty damn good.
I mean, the strides that water's making, I don't know of a precat that's going to be better than most of the single component acrylics out there. I mean,
right. Because the last 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of the R&D has been pushed into water. Because people say, well, wait, aren't there any new CV technologies coming around? I go, no, there's not. I'm not saying there isn't something out there, but the chemists aren't focusing on coming up with the latest, greatest conversion varnish. They're focused on making a better water because that's ultimately the route we're going to go. And so, some of these markets are asking more about it, but they're not making the switch yet. And what is going to be that tipping point? I don't know the answer to that. We thought maybe they would go from conversion varnish into a solvent-based PU, either PU or acrylic PU, and then at some point down the road go to water. But we now think, I'm not saying that's not still going to happen. There's still some that will do that, but I think there'll be some that just leapfrog that and go straight to water.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest holdup, in my opinion, has always been from a CV to a solvent PU or a water PU, polyurethane being is, they advanced those acid catalysts so far to where you had 24-hour pot lives, 2-day pot lives on the CVs. Everybody was okay with that. They loved that. That's the biggest consumption of CVs is those large pot lives. Then you take that into the solvent PU or the water PU. I mean, Malaysia's got their new 16-hour. I haven't used it yet. I don't know anything about it. I know Malaysia or IVM, they've developed the extended pot life for their BCA, the blockchain edition version of their water base. And my guys say it's amazing. So once they extend that pot life of the hardener on the water based, I think they'll just go straight over. I mean, there's no reason not to. Everyone's held up on that pot life so they can mix up why you want to mix up a drum or a 5-gallon bucket? I don't know, but they think that they have to.
Right. And there's a little bit of a hang up also that, the transition process is going to be really difficult. And look, yeah, there's some things that are going to have to change out. There may be some processes that they might want to change. But, help us help you. I mean, we're using this resource. Again, we're not just trying to sell you this cup. We're trying to learn about your business and figure out how that cup is ultimately going to improve your business and your process, not just push that cup on you. There's some people out there who are just trying to push that cup on you and to sell it to you, if nothing else, based on price point.
It's partnerships.
We want to, 100%. It's a partnership, and we want to help you improve your business, because if we help you improve your business, you're going to be more successful, and ultimately you'll be a better customer for us. That a lot of those processes have started, and it's different for everyone. If you have if they're really concerned about making that wholesale switch, you don't have to do that. You might say, okay, you know what? Start with the stains. Let's move from solvent-based stains to water-based stains. We'll focus on that. You can still use the same solvent-based top coats over it, depending on what they're doing. And let's get that integrated and everyone feel comfortable for a while. That could be a month, that could be 6, that could be 3 years. And then we'll take the next step.
We did a lot of hybrids. Like, all right, let's spray your white vinyl sealer or white vinyl primer, and then let's put an acrylic top coat over the top of it. So you get your good fast dry powder, quick turn on your primer, and then the hybrid systems, they're all over the place out there. But that's a good.
But I don't think as many people understand that. They think that it's got to be a wholesale change. Like, oh my God, I got to change all this stuff. Like, relax. We're here to help you. Let's put this let's whiteboard it out, and we'll phase it out. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. I promise you.
Doesn't have to be immediate.
Like, really? I'm like, yeah, I promise.
Well, yeah, and I think from my time in the manufacturing side, it was interesting going from running a business, dealing with customers and contractors every day, to go on the manufacturing side. Then you're dealing with distributors I'm trying to think of how to word this, converting the thought process. Because my thought process as a business owner was, everything I'm doing is developing relationships. So it's not even who should I call. The first instinct is, I'm just going to call Zach. I know him, first name basis. I can get a solution to this problem. Is that relationship? To me, it's the same thing on the manufacturer side. If you manufacture coatings or equipment, sales is relationships. You're developing relationships with your end users. So there's no question of, if the relationship's solid and there's a good foundation, any OEM is going to be like, oh, all right, I'm just going to call Zach. I'm going to call Vince. He's going to get this figured out, and he's going to let me know what we need to do and what the long-term investments, what the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year is going to look like to go full water. And I think a lot of guys in sales, as a sales guy, get stuck up in, how can I get numbers this month? I got to make my numbers. So let's get them converted faster. And if I'm not going to convert them, I'm going to hightail it out of here and go work on another customer, and there's a book out there that, oh man, in my old age, I've started reading a lot of books that talks about, and I've talked to some guys now are like, man, I'm really slow right now. And my question is, what were you doing 3 months ago? Because what you're doing right now is working on sales 3 months from now. If you go back 3 months from right now and you're like, oh yeah, numbers were good, so I took some, okay. So now we know the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really about keeping that pipeline full. I mean, it's all relationship based, 100%. I've yet to find too many, um, outside of the e-commerce world. If it's a face to face business, I found, or I've yet to find too many that aren't relationship based. And we also are very big on team selling. Um, not everyone knows everything, and we have some folks who are good at that relationship and selling, and then others who are more technical in nature. And so you need both to really solve that customer's problem and learn about their business. And so it's kind of a tag team approach.
Yeah, you got to have that technical side. I mean, as well as I do. You go into the paint shop and you have trouble picking up a gun. These guys in those paint booths will run you straight out of the building.
That is for sure. Yeah, another interesting thing we're starting to see quite a bit of is the small footprint, and I'm not going to say the right technical term, but the smaller footprint machines. So that the Chefla and Superficie and others that have these smaller footprint finish lines, if you will, that smaller shops that normally would never have automated to this extent are starting to scoop those up because while they're not inexpensive, they're not millions of dollars, and they don't take up as much space. And oh, by the way, they don't call in sick. They don't take vacations. They can work, 5 or 6 days a week, 10 hours straight. As long as you're keeping the maintenance up and doing the things you need to do. Like in the world of either trying to find good people or you're constantly going through people and all the just HR headaches. Like, and maybe you've already had some guests from those companies on here talking about that, but we're starting to see those in shops that we sell to that normally you would not have envisioned them going that route, but it makes sense. And so then at the same time, it's like, is that a good time also for a transition to think about, hey, you're about ready to buy this Superficie machine, or you're about ready to buy this Chefla machine. You've also been talking about water for the last 2 years. Let's all come together and say, is that a good time to do it?
Exactly.
And that might be a lot of heartburn. Think, oh my God, that's a huge move at once. I get it, but if we're all in this together, like everybody in the same room, and really plot this out, it might be a great time to do it.
It's going to be a great time. Actually, you say that, and I want to say it was just last week or this week. DC sent me a contact for Chefla because I was looking at Chefla Mini. I was been trying to get someone from Chefla to come on the show. And so I talked to I think it was your guys' the guy who you guys deal with at your Chefla rep, and he's got to clear it through corporate, make sure he doesn't get in trouble. And I get that, but that is a huge movement in the cabinet finishing world. I mean, just end pieces altogether. I mean, right before I sold my company, that I was at Vegas probably 3 months before I sold my company because it kind of happened really fast. I was looking at the minis. Like, I was just like, well, crap, they're not that horribly priced. If I take into consideration paying a guy $25, $30 an hour to actually get him to come to work 40 hours a week, you start looking at that expense and you're like, well,
especially if that machine would replace more than one person. If it's going to replace 2, maybe 3. You just start doing the math. And the throughput is as good or better.
Well, and the evenness, I mean, it's going to be more consistent. You're not going to have fat edges. You can pay someone less experienced that maybe has the will to work to stack doors on a rack, So, yeah, I mean, it is a huge movement. I've noticed a lot of shops headed that direction. And thankfully, Chefla and Superficie and these guys that I've met at the shows and stuff, they're hyper focused on the consistency, whether it's a plural component equipment. So focusing it on water-based and not solvent, making sure it's working. I mean, I don't know how many flatline guys I'd have to work with, Superficie or Chefla or any of the other. There's a couple other ones, but those are the two main ones that everyone knows, calling you up and you're talking about viscosity and running through viscosity for OEMs. I mean, the amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Teamwork involved, and they're really good at it. They're really good at it.
Yeah, they are. It's a growing movement. I think it's just going to continue to go that route as technology improves and people just realize it's a solid business investment. It's going to improve their business. And if we're continuing in a climate of 3 to 4% unemployment, and it's hard to find high quality folks consistently. It's kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So let's see here. So, as an entrepreneur coming into this, what about segue into advice you have for guys that are wanting to, one, get into the coatings industry, and two, whether that be on the manufacturing side, or I've noticed this movement, this is kind of sidetracking, jumping all over the place, of we sell paint distributors, your big brand guys, we'll leave them at that, wanting to, some of the independents, the big brand independent guys, wanting to say, hey, the movement in the high-end industrial coatings, whether it be wood, metal, plastic, wanting to segue and start off. Like there's a trend of these guys that are wanting to get into the specialized coatings world. What kind of advice would you give to those guys?
I mean, follow your passion, number one. My passion wasn't necessarily coatings. My passion was to have and run a business and grow a business, whatever that ended up being. So I would do that. As we talked about before, there's a lot of ways of making money, but really focus on what you want to be in that marketplace. So Accessa, we carry different brands and we have a lot of different products, but I can say that one thing we kind of stick our guns to is when we look at or evaluate either a new product or a new vendor, they have to be at a certain quality level for us to feel like it's worth bringing on. I mean, we're not going to sell the low end stuff that is straight up commodity that we can lose a sale over a nickel. Like that, just it's not worth our time. We want to focus on high quality products that help with the value added sale, if you will. And I think that's a good way of going about it, because if you're going to get in the commodity game, I mean, it is what it is, and you're going to get beaten up based on price alone, and you're just going to run in circles, and it's not worth it.
Yeah, agreed.
And which pains me to see some others. Not going to go down this path too far, but some others who still carry a decent product, but they carry a whole bunch of other stuff, and they're out there selling it at just bottom of the barrel. It's a race to the bottom, and they're like, oh, we don't care, we just want to tack it on to the sale of all these other items. Like, it's just ruining the market.
Yeah, you're ruining the market and you're giving up margin. I don't understand that. I used to run into that where guys were selling it cheap, and I'm like, what are you doing? Stop it.
Now, some of those, we'll have other people come back to us and say, well, how do you compete with them? They're selling it at like 15 points or whatever. I'm like, I know, trust me, I get it. He goes, but then why aren't you losing everybody to them? I go, because they're not, if you have a problem with that product and you call them and say, hey, I need you to send a coatings guy to help me out with my line, they're like, yeah, we don't do that. Or I don't have anybody that knows that stuff. So I would say you get what you pay for, but in this respect, not so much from a product standpoint, but maybe more from a support standpoint.
Exactly. Well, that's where you kind of lean back to, that kind of goes circles. I mean, almost full circle back to earlier. It's the relationships. Like, one thing you learn as a business owner is it's not about the cheapest product. And most business owners, there's some that are out there. There's some that do everything, but I would say the vast majority of business owners, it doesn't matter what industry it is, their goal is to get the best bang for their buck. So if I can get 100% service here and pay a little bit more, I'm okay with that. When I had my painting company, I had one of my company reps who would come into my shop every Wednesday, and I had a shelving that had all of our sundries on there for on-site and shop work. he would go through that list and he would type up a text and he'd send it to me of what I was out of, what I was low on, and what he thinks I should get based on what he sent last time. And I'd be like, do it. I know he charged me a little bit more, but I didn't have to go take inventory. It's providing that value that may not be in the product. And it's so important.
And you evaluated what he was telling you and looked at it. It's okay. He's not just selling me extra fluff stuff. Like he's being honest and legit and helping me out, and done, sold.
He built the relationship and the trust level in there that I knew he wasn't just trying to pad his numbers every week to get sundries sold. Like, he was providing me a service that I thought was amazing.
Yeah. And the key moment would come when he said, if you asked him about a certain thing and he said, no, you're good, you don't need more of that, then it's like, all right, he's not bullshitting me.
Exactly. Hey, how am I looking on tape? Nah, you got 3 boxes of tape. Don't worry about this. But I mean, it makes a huge impact as a business owner when you start relying on people and have those relationships where you can trust, even if they're a distributor, even if they're a salesman, or I don't want to give a bad name to salesmen, but the fact is just making sure that the people you're surrounding yourself as a business owner are ones that are adding value to you, even if you pay a little more. Doesn't matter.
Correct. You gotta add value. We will run into people from time to time who are still just stuck on what is the price per gallon. And I get it, and that's just not who we're trying to sell to. If we can't educate them on, hey, look, this product is so much better, and yes, it costs more, but by the way, based on volume solids, I mean, you can get technical if they can comprehend it. So you can do a little applied cost and show them that. If that's flying over their head, which for some it may, that's fine. Is there another way of showing that to them that they can understand? And if there isn't, they still just aren't getting it. They're just only focused on the price per gallon. Then maybe they're just not for us.
Yeah. And those distributors are out there that want that.
I know you're paying $20 a gallon, but how many coats do you say you're putting 5 coats on? Okay, well, you could pay $60 a gallon and just put 2. But if you're willing to spend the time to put 5 coats on, then knock yourself out. But it's only $20 a gallon.
You could put 5 coats of mine on there. That's fine.
Yeah, you could, but you don't need to. And then, like, if you really want me to sit here, I can do the math for you and show you how that $60 is actually going to cost you less in the long run. No. How is that possible? That's $60. This is $20. Never mind. Moving on.
Yep, I've been there. So what do you guys see? What does the future look like for Accessa in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you guys got planned?
Well, I mean, my crystal ball is not any better than anyone else's. We were talking about the economy a little bit yesterday and trying to prognosticate on that with, the new administration coming in. And, all these big economists, a few of them I kind of sort of follow. And, 24 actually wasn't a bad year for us. It was pretty good. I think the first half of 25 should follow suit. And then economists will tell you, they're kind of like weathermen, right? They're going to tell you, here's what they think. But then also throw in a little but if there's this black swan event, then everything's out the window. It's like, well, yeah, I get, yeah, true. I'm pretty, I'll call it, using some financial term, I'm pretty bullish on this year. Pretty bullish overall. Anything can happen. I don't want to get into politics because I'm not a big fan of politics. But the president-elect, I mean, and some of his ideas I think aren't bad, but he can be a little loose with the microphone, and you just never know what's going to come out, and how is whatever that he may say, how is everybody going to react to that? I don't know.
All I tell people is, and you can't definitely objectively look at his first term and say it was horrible. I mean, I don't by any metric. But what I do say is it will definitely be more entertaining than the last 4 years.
That is for sure. If you can take all the buffoonery and set it over here, he's clearly pro-business. And so we have to hope that yields a positive result for us from that aspect. But I go back to, I tell this to my kids all the time, particularly our youngest, who's still in a fair amount of athletics, control the controllables. like control what you can
That's
control.
good.
And so and it's hard, but for us, it's right now we are in some markets that we don't have the market share we feel like we should have. There's still a lot of growth opportunities, so we're really going to entrench ourselves and focus on that. Um, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, like we're not cruise control kids. I'm always looking for that next opportunity, whatever that may be. Our current footprint is not, where I ultimately want it to be. So is that going to change in 2025 or not? I don't know the answer to that. Even if I did, I probably wouldn't share it. But
Fair.
we're always looking to grow when and where it makes sense, of course. And so I think the next 5 years will be fun. I'm excited. I'm interested to see. I'm just as interested as you are to see kind of where we are 5 years from now versus today.
It's interesting because I feel like, and two pronged. I'm going to get off subject here in just a minute, but what I've feel is a weird word. What I've noticed is it's the industrial coatings world is expanding and growing at an incredible rate, especially in the cabinet. It's in the metal too. Metal's a little more price conscious. We both know that. I mean, it's a little more just DTM, unless you get crazy. But with, I would say, our generation, we're probably both right around the same age as we get into, into the retirement age in the next 10 years, 15 years. But our generation in our 40s are coming to that world of we are settling into the forever house. And our generation tends to, like, you went through like the boomers who kind of got into that industrialized, everything needs to be cheap. And that drove everything down. And now our generation is like, we want nicer stuff. Everything's a lot more visual. Instagram has helped that. Social media has helped that. So we want nicer things. So I feel like the envelope for higher end cabinets, higher end finishes has just crept up and is keeping that upward motion for our world. And I think it's going to be, the next 5 years is going to be crazy.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Not just an appetite for nicer things, but an appetite for also more um, environmentally conscious things. That millennial generation, or they're going to be more interested in waterborne as well, and whether it be from HGTV or what have you, they're going to push upwards back to the manufacturing channel as well. So I think you have a squeeze. If there's more regulation to emit less into the atmosphere, so they're getting pressured that way, and the consumer is pushing, hey, this is what we want, that's going to help drive it even faster. And so the good news is I think the right products are available. It just hasn't hit that tipping point yet. It's starting to, but it's just not there yet. And we're ready. This time of year, of course, as you can see outside, shipping waterborne is not the greatest, but there's options for that, and we'll all get smarter as we get more and more into it and go from there. But and again, it goes back to that applied cost thing. Yeah, the product per gallon may be more expensive, but if the solids are 50-60% versus something that's 25-30%,
and then you get tag team that with you guys with the equipment. If you're using an airless that's got 40 to 50% transfer efficiency to go to something like an air assisted, or you can get in the low 90s transfer efficiency. I mean, partner that with a higher solids coating. I mean, it's a win-win game for a lot of these OEMs. They can end up, when I tell people this all the time. When I made the switch to PUs with a higher solids, making my own colors, I did all my own weight, color by weight, and I switched everything to Kremlin in my shop. Samez, all air assisted airless. First full year, spent $88,000 less on paint.
As a paint distributor, that's bad news for me, but that's awesome for you. I mean, ultimately, if we were part of that to help you achieve, like, I'm not saying we were, but whoever your supplier was, if we were part of that, that's something to feel good about, because now you're sold on that relationship has got that much stronger.
done. And it's like a mixture. Part of it was making your own colors. That's a whole nother investment to doing your own colors. And you can do them by weight. Can mix up a pint if I need a pint. I don't have to go order a gallon. I get my paint when I need it.
And dude, if more of our customers did all their own colors instead of us,
I am the biggest proponent of building champions and OEMs to make their own colors. It is the fastest way to save money. But as an OEM, but as a distributor, it's almost a wash because you've got the colorant. Usually you've got computer, you've got software that you supply the OEM with that for a cost, and there may be an offset there, but I went from Precat and CV to 2K solvent poly, ended up paying more. I mean, again, applied cost, volume solids, everything. So, but initially I was like, oh crap. But then I'm going all in, make my own colors. Cause there was no one in my market that would do color 2K polyurethanes, make colors. Still no one in that market. It's a whole nother problem. But that combined with making your own colors and getting to better equipment and understanding the equipment and getting the right training, I mean, it changed the game.
Yeah. And then even putting the equipment and the financials out of the equation, your finished product, do you feel like you improved your product?
The finished product's better. The callbacks were 80% less. I mean, it was insane game changer. But so I know we're approaching on the hour, so I got one question for you that I curious, just on a business side. A lot of guys that I've been talking to on the manufacturing side, and even the application side, and wanted to get your thoughts on this one. 24 wasn't a horrible year. I don't think anyone said it was horrible. Some people were flat, some people grew a little bit, but one common thing that I did get was it was the first, most people saw an increment of 24 sales with all the fluff money out of the way, COVID gone, as like an increase over pre-COVID, over like 19 or 20. With 19 was probably the last real year pre-COVID. That's, I mean, would you say you were kind of in that ballpark as well?
We were actually up, but have heard that conversation or had that conversation with several others. I'm in a peer group of other business owners or managers, totally different markets. We don't want any competing folks in that same group, but we have over the last 18 to 24 months have all talked about that. It's kind of weird is the non-technical word to use. The numbers look decent. You don't feel as busy. I mean, let's face it, during COVID or shortly thereafter, everything was crazy. It was like, you can't find product, you can't get product. Some things were dead. Some things were just off the charts. Everything was just nuts. So you're not in that mode anymore, which is fine. But there isn't a telltale sign like, hey, things are really going to slow down now, or things are really going to pick up. We're just kind of somewhere in between. And you go hit 5 customers, and 2 are kind of slow but not dead. The other 3 are still pretty busy, but they're all doing the same thing in a relatively close geographical area, so it doesn't make sense. But to your point, we're all comparing it back to 2019, and so you might say, "Oh God, you're comparing it to 3, 4, 5 years ago." Now that's probably bad, right? Like, well, let me ask you this: was 2019 a record year for you over 2018? And almost everyone said, "Yep." I go, so really, it's not too bad. I mean, yes, you would think incrementally you should have progressed this much further ahead since then, but with COVID throwing everything out of the loop, it's really not bad.
Well, COVID and then all the money given away and no one traveling. Like it feels like the last 3, 4 years have just been, gimme years on the business side of it. It's like, okay, now we can get to, like, no one wanted that new normal to end on the financial side, but it had to end sometime. We had to zero back and get back to a neutral point. And I think that's what 24 did for a lot of guys.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think so. We're excited. Like I said, I'm bullish on where things are headed right now. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier. You got to maintain that pipeline. And yeah, we both know sales don't in this industry don't happen. Like you don't just walk in and make a sale. It's a process. And then in some cases you might get lucky and make it in 3 months. There have been products I've worked on for 2 years, and some of which we didn't get it. And it's the nature of the beast. But you've got to keep that pipeline full.
You got to keep looking for. I mean, there's an endless opportunity out there. That's the great part about this industry. There's so many potential customers out there. So, and then we'll wrap it up. My final question I wrap up with everyone is just what's something about Vince that outside you like to do, a passion that you have outside, so the readers can kind of get to know you a little bit, the listeners.
Yeah, for me, I think some people may know this, so I'll try to keep this relatively short. But when I was 26, I was diagnosed with cancer, and as you probably have noticed, I'm still a pretty competitive individual, and so when I was going through that ordeal, I was given a couple of people gave it to me, but Lance Armstrong's first book. It's not about the bike. And it's not about, as it says, it's not about the bike. It has nothing to do with cycling. It's about his experience. And there was a Friday. I used to get my chemo treatments on Thursday, so I'd take Friday off and just kind of chill. And flew through that book. And regardless of what you think about Lance Armstrong today, a hyper competitive individual, obviously. But he talked about why he started the Lance Armstrong Foundation, which today is Live Strong. And I was like, F yeah, man, I'm in. I wasn't sitting around, moping like, why me? I was like, this is BS, and now I want to do something about it. Obviously, we're focusing on trying to get through it, but beyond that, why did this happen? How can we do something to try to reduce this occurrence to the next 26-year-old or anybody else for that matter? And so I kind of turned to my wife and said, hey, I really like what Lance has decided to do. What can we do? And my wife likes to throw a party. She's like, well, let's raise some money and we'll send some to Lance and we'll do some local or whatever. So long story short, born and raised in Indy, we were still here. Obviously, it was really easy to gather friends and family around. And so that's what we did. So we had this party. I was maybe a month out of my last chemo treatment. And our goal was to raise 10 grand. And we ended up raising like just shy of $45,000. And it was a bunch of like, mid 20 somethings that we didn't know what the heck we were doing. And we're sitting around at 3 a.m. I think I had my first beer in like a year, and everyone else is, certainly much more into it than I was. It was like 3 a.m. and a buddy next to me who was kind of acting as controller. I go, so what do you think we're at? He goes, dude, I think we raised like 45 grand. And I'm like, okay, you can't see straight. Let's go and go home. Come back tomorrow. We got to clean up and then sober up, and we'll figure out where we actually are at. And sure enough, that's where we ended up at. And we're like, holy crap! Like the feeling we got was awesome. So basically, what transpired that next morning in a little bit of a fog for them, not so much for me, but we decided, hey, let's create something here and really roll with it. So ultimately, that worked itself into what is today the Heroes Foundation. So we created our own nonprofit. And what we do is raise funds to pretty much strictly for the Indiana cancer community, but in the areas of support, prevention, and research. And just very, very briefly, we help fund some support programs at the different cancer centers here in the state, support programs that like non-medicinal treatments. So if, when I was going through, they had all these other options like, hey, you've lost a ton of weight. We want you to talk to this dietitian because we want you to put weight back on, but also the right weight. If you're into music or art therapy, or you have some psychosocial issues you need to work through, or you have kids and they're really traumatized by what dad's going through, they have those services. So back then it was kind of a pet project. Today it's commonplace in most big cancer centers, which is great to see. And it's amazing how some of those services really help people. The prevention piece is what it is. It's the usual stuff that we've been hearing for decades, but helping to keep driving. Hey, don't smoke, don't overdrink, watch what you eat, all that stuff. So it's really promoting that. And we have I'll call it a cycling / triathlon team that has kind of emerged and they're kind of one of our arms for carrying that prevention message out there. And then the last piece was research, which is pretty self-explanatory, but it was the last piece of the pie for us, because we said, research takes millions or billions of dollars. If we only have, I'll say only, but if we only have like 25 grand in the world of research, like that's nothing. What can we actually do with it? So as we were trying to figure out if that's what we wanted to do, we actually went and spoke to a couple of physicians at a couple of different cancer centers. They're like, actually, that 25K is huge. I'm like, okay, great. Why? Educate me. It's like, well, I'm Dr. So-and-so. If I had this hunch for modifying a treatment that I think will be better, I can't just immediately go out into the National Cancer Institute and get a $5 million grant. They're like, go into the lab, do a bunch of research, prove some of this stuff out first, and then we'll look at it. Well, that requires time, money to buy lab time, mice, supplies, staff, like whatever. So that 25K, I mean, think of it, going back to the business side, think of it as an angel investor. You're being an angel investor to those physicians who have that initial hunch to go in the lab, start doing some initial work. And if they prove the theory out, or they start to go in that direction, then they can start getting the bigger dollars from either government agencies or other places. And I'll tell you what, I think it was either our second or third research gift. I think it was 40 or 50 grand. Went to this pediatric research project, and it was here locally in Indianapolis. And ultimately, this guy, I think he was Polish, this physician, unfortunately he's passed away since, but he basically invited our board in. So however many people, like 10 or so, that actually could make it that day. And we went into his lab. He's like, I want to show you something. He was super, very excited and animated. And we're like, okay. So he starts telling us kind of in his broken English, and like, none of us are, I'm not a PhD or an MD. And like, it's just flying over my head. Like, I have no idea what he just said. Sounds great, but I don't know what you said. He's like, he kind of tell that some people were getting it, but not everyone. He's like, come here. So he went to the biggest monitor he could find, and he put a slide on this microscope and projected up on the screen. And he's like, watch, see those dots? Those are cancer cells. Now I'm going to inject onto this slide this therapy that I've been working on, and just watch the screen. I'm like, okay. And it kind of looks like an old school Atari game. So he puts it on there, and all of a sudden you see this medicine start attacking these cancer cells, and all of a sudden they start a couple of them start shaking, and literally like blew up. And he kind of looks at us, and we're like,
what?
I get it. Hell yes, man. Like, what else do you need? So
that
he was
is
able
amazing.
to take that initial that initial money that we gave him, those initial findings, to then go on and get much larger grants to really carry this project forward. And I don't know where it's at now, but this was, gosh, that was like 15 years ago. But it's really cool. So anyway, that's kind of like my second full-time job for the last, this our 2025 is our 25th year. And so we're, at the end of this month, we'll be celebrating our 25th gala. And we're now at a point where we brought some staff in so I can kind of help take a step back. And really, it's not just so I can take a step back, because I've been working 2 jobs for 25 years, but allowing the vision to take shape, because the goal, of course, is I want this thing to go another 25 years, but it's got to be able to do it without me. And so that's kind of the process we've started. So that's long answer to your question, but for those that don't know.
That is awesome, Vince, man. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
That's incredible, man. Oh man, that's a crazy story. Well, I definitely want an update on that one. See how that thing goes, and see if we can't do something with you guys. Because I mean, that's a big one for me. It's just helping people in general.
Yeah, it affects all of us in some way.
I just like helping people that need help. That's where I'm at. I mean, if I can help, I want to be able to help. Man, well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you've got stuff to do. Apparently you got 2 businesses to take care of for the foreseeable future. But man, Vince, I appreciate you coming on. Awesome talk. Love the business side. Any last bit of advice for the listeners?
Follow your passion and keep grinding.
I love it, man. Thank you. Again, everybody, stay tuned every Monday. We got a new episode coming out. Check out Vince, check out Accessa. We'll have the links down in the bio, so you guys can check out Accessa. If you're in his market, need some wood coatings, give him a call, and we'll see everybody next week.
And And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.